Hey everybody, Mike here with Delta Faucet. Today, we're gonna walk through how to install a single-handle kitchen faucet with a side sprayer and diamond seal technology. This technology has included integrated supply lines, which connect directly to your supply shutoffs, reduces leak points, and is easier to install. Now, Delta makes kitchen faucets with side sprayers in 2, 3, or 4 hole configurations. So I think it's a good idea to take a quick second to confirm that the faucet you're installing today will work with your setup. Now for this install, we'll be using the Collins model, but this video will also work for the wide variety of different styles and finishes of Delta single-handle kitchen faucets with side sprayers and diamond seal technology. Okay, now let's collect the tools and supplies we'll need to complete this installation. You will need an adjustable wrench, some safety glasses, maybe some silicone, also a flashlight for underneath your sink, and I think it's a good idea to grab a couple towels. Okay, now that you've got all those tools and supplies together, let's get started. So the first step of this installation is going to be preparing our faucet for placing it into our countertop surface. Now here I have the plastic gasket. You notice the gasket has two sides. It has a bottom that's completely flat except for this middle ridge here. And that middle ridge is going to sit tight against our countertop into the center hole. Also, it has a front and a back. You can see the front is labeled with the word front, and that's going to correspond to the front of our faucet. And on the faucet, I know it's the front of the faucet because it's the way the spout faces. So once you have your gasket in the correct orientation, we're going to begin feeding it over the end of our supply lines through that middle hole. Then carefully bring it all the way up our supply lines, and then also getting our spout tubes in there until it's up to the shanks of the faucet. I want to make sure I get over each shank on each side, and then work it all the way up until it's sitting tight against the bottom of my faucet. With that in place, we can now move over to installing our faucet into our countertop. I'm going to be feeding my lines again through the center hole, making sure I'm being very careful to not damage them in any way. My spout line's down in there too. Shanks go in the outer holes until my faucet comes in contact with my countertop. Now what I'm checking for here is just quick alignment, making sure everything looks good, and also that I'm not pinching that plastic gasket in any way. Also, I'll point out here that I'm installing this faucet on a smooth countertop surface. Now, if your countertop at home was a little bit irregular, I definitely recommend adding a bead of silicone underneath that gasket all the way around to ensure a nice watertight seal. Everything's looking great up here, so now I can move underneath the sink and start securing it into place. To secure our faucet to our countertop, we're going to be using these lock nuts. Now, each lock nut has a flat side to it. We want to make sure that flat side comes in contact with the underside of our countertop. So once you're ready, let's get up back behind the sink and start threading these onto the shanks of our faucet. I'm gonna take my first lock nut, start threading it on the end of the shank of my faucet, and I wanna make sure I'm not cross-threading this at all. Then I'll spin it all the way up to the underside of my countertop and get it nice and snug. I don't wanna tighten that up all the way yet. Come over to my other side. Making sure it spins easily all the way up to the bottom of my countertop, and then snug that one up as well. Now's a great time to check final alignment up top, and then once I'm happy with it, I'll tighten them both all the way down. Next, we can move on to installing our side sprayer. Now, if you're not installing this, that's totally fine. Feel free to skip ahead in the video to the section where we start making our water connections and flushing our lines. So I have my sprayer support here with my matching trim piece. I'm going to fit the trim piece over the end of the support, all the way up to the top lip of the support until it kind of has a little bit of a click to it that lets me know it's fully seated. Once that's done, I'm going to go ahead and drop this into the hole that I'm using for my side sprayer, like so. After that, we can take our sprayer hose and start feeding the end of it down through the support. Again, taking care to make sure I'm not causing any damage, all the way until it fully seats like that. Okay, everything's looking great up here, so now we can move back under the sink to start locking that into place. To secure the side sprayer in place, it's going to be just like we did with the faucet, using another lock nut. Again, I want to make sure the flat side faces the underside of my countertop, and then it's going to thread right up the shank. The only difference here is I want to make sure that the end of my sprayer hose feeds through the middle of my lock nut as I do this. Once you're ready, let's go ahead and secure it down to our countertop. Threading my lock nut over the hose up to the shank of my sprayer base, and just like for the faucets, I want to make sure it's not cross-threaded, spins easily. all the way up to the underside of my countertop, and then give it an extra turn to lock it into place. All right, we've got that sprayer base all tightened to our countertops. Now we can move on to connecting our sprayer hose. Now to do this, I'm going to take the end of my sprayer hose and connect it to the bottom of the diverter coming out the bottom of my faucet. Now you notice the diverter has a blue plug in it. I want to stress this. You don't want to remove that blue diverter plug unless you're installing the sprayer hose. So once you're ready, come to the bottom of your diverter. I'm going to unclip the blue clip to the side to unlock it. And I'm going to pull the diverter plug straight down and out. Next, I'm going to replace the diverter with the end of my sprayer hose, pushing it all the way in until it fully seats, and then I can lock it into place by moving that blue clip back into position until it snaps. And I think it's a good idea to go ahead and just give it a slight tug down to confirm I've got a nice tight connection. All right, so we've got that all hooked up, but I want to talk about this blue diverter plug just for a second because I want to make sure that I don't lose this. That way, if in the future I decide that I don't want to use my sprayer anymore and install something else in that hole, I have this where I can reinstall it where the sprayer hose currently is and then use my faucet as normal. Next, we can move on to connecting our supply lines. Now the supply lines are color-coded on the bottom. Red is for your hot and blue is for your cold. So I want to make sure I'm connecting them to the correct stub outs underneath my sink here. When I connect my stub outs, you might also notice that you might have a little bit of extra tube when bringing it to the stub out, and that's totally fine. There's two things you can do to deal with this. First, you can kind of make like a helix pattern to shorten up the line a little bit, or you could even make a loop in it. However, if you do have to make a loop, I want to point out that we want to make sure the loop isn't any less than, say, about 8 inches in diameter side to side, because it could cause a kink in the line. So once you're ready, go ahead and bring your first line down to your stub out. For me, I've got the hot side. Bring it to the hot stub out, and then threading it on by hand. All right, once I've got that hand tightened, I'm going to use my adjustable wrench here and give it another turn and a half. Not enough to over tighten it, just enough to snug it up to ensure a leak-free connection. Okay, we've got our hot side all connected. I'm going to repeat the same exact steps for my cold side. Now that we've made all of our connections underneath the sink, we can move on to the final phase of this installation. The first thing I'm going to check is my final alignment, just taking one last look at my faucet, making sure I'm happy with the position and how it orients to the sink. Okay, things look great there, so now we can move on to flushing our lines. And what this means is basically running some water through our faucet to clear any debris that may have gotten in there during the installation process, which could lead to a flow issue. So to do this, the first step is to put a towel or something similar in the bottom of my sink to cover the drain. That way, if I drop any small parts, they don't fall down the drain. After that, we're going to be removing the aerator off the end of the spout of my faucet. Now, you should be able to unscrew this by hand, but if it's a little bit stuck, that's totally fine. You can use a rubber jar gripper or a rubber glove, something similar, to get a good grip and get it unscrewed. One thing I want to point out here is I want to make sure we're not using pliers or something that could damage the finish of the aerator itself. Also, you'll see mine has a rubber gasket here. If yours doesn't have a rubber gasket, that's totally fine. Not all models ship with one. However, I do want to make sure that gasket isn't still stuck up underneath the spout, so just take a quick peek up under there to confirm that everything is clear. Now, once that's all complete, we're going to make sure that the supply stops underneath our sink are in the off position. After that, we're going to come back up top and turn our faucet handles to the full mix position. What that means is all the way on and halfway between the hot and the cold side. Once that's done, we're going to go back underneath the sink and turn on both supply stops and let water run through the system for, say, 30 seconds or so. Now, a little bit of a pro tip here is since we've removed the aerator, there could be some additional water pressure flowing through our faucet, which could lead to some additional spraying and splashing around the sink area. One thing I like to do is grab a washcloth and go ahead and just hold it over the end of the spout as we run water through the system, which should help cut down on that splashing. All right, once everything looks good to you, let's go ahead and run some water through our system. Okay, once that's done, I'm going to make sure I leave my supply stops in the on position and turn the water off from my faucet handle up top. Now, we've completed flushing the system, we just need to reinstall our aerator. So just in the reverse steps as before, making sure I've got that rubber gasket if I have one on the top of the aerator, and then carefully screwing it back into the end of my spout, making sure I'm not cross-threading that aerator. I don't need to over-tighten the aerator, just need to be hand snug so it doesn't want to fall out. All right, I've got the aerator back on there, so that about wraps up this installation. My final step would be to check under my sink one last time to confirm there are no leaks. I hope this installation went well for you. And remember, if you have any additional questions, you can always reach out to the Delta Faucet customer service team. They're more than happy to help.